At dawn the horns sound, and the ground itself seems to move as an army emerges from the mist. Yet the castle does not panic, because castles were not built to fight battles. They were built to survive them. Here is the paradox that shocks modern minds. Most medieval sieges did not end with heroic assaults, but with weeks or months of waiting, starvation, fear, and patience. Imagine standing on a stone wall, knowing the enemy outnumbers you 10-1, yet believing you still have the advantage. That confidence came from a brutal understanding of time. Castles were machines designed to outlast human endurance. Thick walls were not just barriers, they were promises that the siege would be long, cold, and expensive for the attackers. Every day the enemy camped outside, their food ran lower, their morale cracked, and disease crept in. Inside the castle, survival depended on planning done years before the first arrow flew. Wells were dug deep into bedrock, granaries were sealed tight, and kitchens were positioned to feed hundreds from limited fuel. This is the mystery of medieval siege warfare. Victory was often decided long before the army arrived, locked into stone by architects who understood that patience could be deadlier than any sword. To understand how castles survived, you must picture medieval warfare as a slow, grinding test rather than constant combat. Armies could not supply themselves easily. Roads were poor, food spoiled fast, and winter was a greater enemy than steel. A besieging force had to feed thousands while doing almost nothing, a situation that drained money, discipline, and lives. Castles exploited this reality. Built on hills, cliffs, or surrounded by water, they forced attackers to haul supplies uphill or across muddy ground. Moats were not always deep, but they turned the land into a nightmare of disease and exhaustion. Inside the walls, life became rigid and controlled. Rations were measured carefully, animals were slaughtered early to save grain, and fires were limited to reduce smoke and fuel use. Lords understood that morale mattered as much as food, so chapels, routines, and shared meals kept defenders mentally strong. Knowledge passed from siege to siege, teaching which foods lasted longest, how to collect rainwater, and when to conserve strength. Over time, this wisdom faded as gunpowder changed warfare, but during the medieval period, it meant that a castle was not a fortress of stone alone. It was a living system designed to endure misery longer than any army outside its walls. Here is where the hidden logic becomes clear. Castles survived sieges by turning basic physics and biology into weapons. Thick stone walls did more than stop arrows. They absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night, stabilizing indoor temperatures. Narrow windows reduced heat loss and made it almost impossible to shoot inside. Wells were often the most critical feature, carved deep so poison could not reach them, ensuring water long after rivers outside were cut off. Food storage followed simple but clever rules. Grain was dried and sealed to prevent rot, salted meat removed moisture that bacteria needed to survive, and ale was safer than water because fermentation killed harmful organisms. Even waste was managed carefully, with garderobes built into walls to dump refuse away from living areas, reducing disease. Defenders rotated watch duties to prevent exhaustion and avoided unnecessary fights, knowing injury could be fatal without medicine. Attackers often tried to starve castles, but starvation worked both ways. Every extra day weakened the besiegers more than the defenders. This logic was discovered through hard experience, repeated failure, and survival. A science built without books, written instead into stone and habit. The lessons of medieval siege survival still matter today, even if we no longer face armies at our gates. Castles teach the power of preparation over reaction. Modern emergency planning follows the same principles: secure water first, store stable food, control energy use, and protect morale. The idea of passive temperature control appears again in energy-efficient buildings that use thick walls, insulation, and thermal mass rather than constant heating or cooling. Community resilience during disasters mirrors castle life. Shared resources, clear routines, and trust reduce panic and waste. Even the concept of outlasting, rather than overpowering, appears in modern strategy. From cybersecurity systems designed to resist breaches over time to businesses built to survive long market downturns. Medieval builders did not know modern science, but they understood cause and effect deeply. They knew humans break before stone if conditions are controlled. That knowledge faded when technology promised faster victories, but recent crises have reminded us that endurance still wins. The castle was not just a military structure, it was an early survival manual, proving that patience, planning, and respect for limits can defeat overwhelming force without a single charge. When you look at a ruined castle today, it is easy to see only broken walls and fallen towers, but those stones once held back hunger, fear, and armies that believed victory was inevitable. Castles survived brutal medieval sieges not through magic or luck, but through an unglamorous mastery of time, resources, and human psychology. They remind us that survival is rarely dramatic in the way stories suggest. It is quiet, disciplined, and often uncomfortable. The defenders who lived through sieges did not think of themselves as heroes. They thought in terms of the next meal, the next watch, the next day survived. That mindset is the real legacy of medieval fortresses. In a world that often seeks quick solutions, castles whisper an older truth. Lasting strength comes from preparation and restraint. Understanding how they endured against impossible odds reconnects us with a kind of intelligence that modern life often forgets. If this story changed how you see those ancient walls, consider continuing the journey, sharing it, or exploring more forgotten knowledge, because the past still has much to teach us about surviving the future.